Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. And thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Retain Customers and Partners with a Results-Driven Learning Strategy. I'm Claude Werder. I'm Senior VP and Principal Analyst at Brandon Hall Group, and I'll be your moderator today. Our special guest is Seth Johnson. Seth is Vice President of Customer Experience at LearnUpon. Seth has over 25 years experience building customer-facing teams in technology, with more than half of that in learning. Formerly educated in technical writing and instructional technology, Seth is unapologetically forever learning on the job, as we all should be, right? Welcome, Seth.
Thank you.
I want to extend a warm thank you to our sponsor, LearnUpon, which is a Brandon Hall Group Smart Choice Preferred Provider. Founded in 2012, LearnUpon's mission is to partner with businesses that believe that delivering great learning is essential to achieve great results. LearnUpon's LMS is powered by leading technology and provides companies with a centralized hub to easily create and manage learning programs for every audience in an engaging, learner-friendly way. LearnUpon partners with over 1,300 customers to champion simple, learner-centric experience for over 13 million learners across over 30 countries. With more than 260 employees and offices in Dublin, Philadelphia, Salt Lake City, Belgrade, and Sydney, LearnUpon LMS makes it easy for businesses to deliver learning that impacts what matters, is of course performance, retention, and growth. For those of you who aren't familiar with Brandon Hall Group, we're a research and advisory firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. A quick mention that we currently have several certification programs that we run that are open for enrollment, and that includes our Certified Learning Strategist program that many of you may be interested in. Visit certification.brandonhall.com to learn more about how to earn that designation. For those of you, open surveys is next. Your participation in our research is one of the most crucial components of our insights and thought leadership that we provide. So we'd love it if you took a few minutes to take one of our surveys. The 3 ones that are open now are on the screen. So they're on employee experience, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and a topic that we'll be covering in many respects today, which is learning measurement and impact. Links will be available in your handout, and you can always visit brandonhall.com. All participants in our research receive a piece of complimentary research or a complimentary report once the results are analyzed. And finally, before we get started with the content, a few logistics. So to ask questions, and we hope you do throughout the presentation, please use the questions panel on your control bar. We'll leave time at the end for questions, but as I said, we'll also probably take some during the presentation as well. The webinar is being recorded, and we'll share a link to the recording and a PDF of the presentation via email in about 24 hours or less. But if you would like to download a copy of today's presentation instantly, the link to do so will be available in the chat very shortly. Chat is also open for today, and we really hope you'll share your thoughts and experiences as we go along in the webinar today. Your feedback and perspective on what Seth and I present and on your own experiences with extended enterprise learning will make the webinar more valuable, I think, for everyone. So please, I hope you feel comfortable in doing that. Or if you're not, just simply pop in, say hello, and let us know where you're coming from today. So our agenda, we hope to cover a lot of ground for you today. The overriding objective, I think, is to develop a results-driven strategy for the extended enterprise to help you understand what that is and how to do it. In the process, we'll identify the key metrics for measuring success in external learning. We'll share some success stories that LearnUpon has had with customers in terms of creating and getting results from this kind of extended enterprise learning strategy. We'll hope to help you optimize external learning programs to drive positive business outcomes. And then, of course, all of this helps you create a stronger business case for investment in learning in the future. So let's hop right in with the content. So the use of extended enterprise learning has grown dramatically over the last 3 years. In 2020, only about 1/4 of organizations had both internal and external learning programs. But now, as the slide shows, in 2023, this is from our latest benchmarking study, 77% of organizations do offer both external and internal learning, and only about a quarter are offering learning only for employees. So whenever there's such a quick and drastic change, it takes some time before organizations can adopt leading practices. In the past, when we talked about learning strategy and learning measurement, we focused pretty much exclusively on internal learning. But now we'd be remiss if we didn't also focus on the finer points of extended enterprise learning, with so many organizations doing both. So this includes, of course, learning strategy and measurement, but there are many similarities between internal and external, but also some important differences. So that's what we kind of want to focus on today. So here are, from our research, the external training audiences. A lot of different potential audiences. Customers are the most popular, followed by contract and contingent workers. Many organizations, when they get started, perhaps with the customers or contractors, add others over time. And they can be as various as partners, distributors, suppliers, and there should be a results-driven learning strategy really for each audience. So what are the objectives of the external learning? There can be several, of course. Here's some data that shows the percentage of organizations that have various objectives. The most common is simply to educate various audiences on specific topics of interest, followed closely by training end users on new or existing products and services. Onboarding for both customers and remote employees is also popular. Whatever your objective, it's important that you define what it is and how you're going to prove that you achieved it. So before we dig deeper into this, we want to take a moment to understand where you all are in extended enterprise learning. So we have a little poll for you that we'll launch in a second. And the question is, to what extent does your organization leverage extended enterprise learning? Is it A, not at all, and you don't really plan to do it? Not at all, but you're planning a launch, which may be why you're on this webinar. Maybe you've recently started, but are looking to improve your practices. Or you're established, but you're still looking to improve and maybe expand what you're doing. And then E, we are established and excelling. And if you answer E, I hope you'll participate and give us some hints and some of your experiences in the chat as we go along. So it'll be interesting to see what everybody says. I'm going to bet that the most prevalent answer is C. We'll see what happens here. Melissa, let us know when we're ready to go.
Okay, looks like we've reached a good sample size. I'm going to go ahead and share these results with you all.
And actually, the most prevalent answer, about half of you, is that you're established but looking to expand and improve. So I think we can help you with that, with the strategies and the information that Seth's going to share. About 20%, a little under 20%, have recently started but are looking to improve, and very few of you are established and excelling. So hopefully we can help you get closer to that. So just a couple more points before I turn it over to Seth. If you are going to launch or excel in external training, one of the challenges, and what we'll be talking a lot about today, is to reduce the gap that exists in most learning between the importance that organizations place in learning to drive business success and its actual effectiveness. This data that I'm showing here applies to internal learning, but it also applies to external learning as well. 62% of organizations say learning is important to drive business success, but only 22% say that learning is delivered in a manner that drives demonstrated results aligned with business objectives. So what we want to do today is help you close the gap between importance and effectiveness, whether you're just beginning your program or trying to expand and improve it. And there are a lot of reasons for the gap, but a big one is that most organizations do not have a strategy or standardized approach to learning measurement. I think it's safe to say, to use a very technical term, that learning measurement is a big bugaboo for learning professionals. It's a mountain for some that's so steep to climb that it's almost paralyzing. It's difficult for many organizations to get started. And many of the competencies required We move to the next slide. Oh, sorry. Yeah, thank you. Many of the competencies required to excel in learning measurement, internally and externally, are not in abundance in most learning organizations. So these are the competencies that are found less often than others in learning organizations. So data science, analytics, neuroscience application, all of these outcome-based learning construction, which we're going to be talking about today, are all things that most organizations really struggle with. So there's no surprise that the measurement and creating a results-driven learning strategy is tough. So as I turn things over to Seth now, getting started on such a challenging change often starts with simply believing you can do it and pushing yourself to do it. Seth?
Thanks so much, Claude. Yeah, I appreciate the research that Brandon Hall Group always brings to presentations like this. It's an interesting thing, right? You get a certain amount of experience in the field and you start to believe that you know what is right and what is not right, and to make certain assumptions. And I've always appreciated Brandon Hall Group's insights as a way of challenging what I have come to believe over a lot of years doing a similar thing. So thanks for sharing a lot of that as background here. I'm also fascinated with the idea of mantras, which are just short, simple, factual statements that typically are expressed in 10 small words or fewer if done right. My acquaintance with these has come about through parenting, specifically adoptive parenting in a couple of cases. And, presenting important insights to children this way is a great way for them to learn and to retain essential ideas. But the more I've dealt with them with kids, the more I've realized that they're really good for me. And so I have a few of my favorites here to share with you by way of introduction to the idea. This one is applicable a lot with my children. When we are kind, we are happy. It's a really good one for me as well. Sometimes you forget in the heat of a moment. Kindness leads to happiness. Here's another one that my parents were fond of using on me. If not you, who? If not now, when? It's a good one for warding off that bugaboo, to use the technical term used earlier, procrastination, which gets at all of us. One more for fun, because it's self-contradictory, but also true. No one ever, always, or never's anything. So let's think of a few of these mantras that might apply to us as learning professionals. Number one, learning drives business results. I think you believe this because you're here. You're here talking about how to demonstrate that with your programs. And also because it's really hard to be involved with the learning industry or learning field for any amount of time without understanding that what we do is incredibly impactful on business results. And I think especially extended enterprise learning programs they have that potential. I think that the dramatic growth that Claude alluded to earlier in programs of this kind probably arises out of the shared understanding that we all have that extended enterprise learning can make big differences in business outcomes that matter. But paired with that is maybe a second mantra for us as learning people. And that is, we thrive when we measure. And maybe the data that Claude presented a moment ago shows that we don't all measure. And anytime you point, 3 times as many fingers pointed back at you. So in my own work in learning programs, I have not always measured well. And I ask myself, why is that? And we'll get to that in a little bit, because I've always understood academically and practically that it's a good thing to do. So why doesn't it happen? And how can I get over that bump in my own learning programs and maybe offer some thoughts to you as we think about the task in front of us with learning in the extended enterprise. Claude, a couple more insights from your group, and then we'll ask one more poll question.
Yeah, so just to level set again on measurement specifically, in our research, we've asked people about how they're measuring ROI, specifically on external learning programs, and this is what you told us. Most of you are doing customer satisfaction and NPS. Customer retention comes next, but a lot of the things that I think, I don't know what you think, Seth, that are more valuable, things such as product usage, feature adoption, reduction in support requests, some of these other things are not done nearly as often, and I think they have a lot of value.
Yeah. I mean, these have value too, of course, but as you and I chatted about briefly a while ago, like, they're good, but they're lagging indicators. Many of these things, if you see badness in one of these areas, the challenge there is that the problem has gotten to a point where it's critical. You are not at that point intervening to prevent problems. You are responding to a problem that already exists. And some of the other things you mentioned that don't appear here, that are less commonly tracked, allow you to intervene a lot earlier and use learning really to ward off problems rather than responding to them.
And on the next slide, just shows how people measure, what they do. First of all, it's important to look at the little gray bar that about a quarter of us don't do it at all. And then when people do use it, learner surveys of some sort are the most common. And then there's a big drop off to customer satisfaction scores, testing and assessments. You can see the different ways that people do it. It's important to make sure you have some sort of framework and define KPIs for measuring success. So however you go about it, and we're going to drill into this now, it's really important that you do it in a structured way, and Seth is going to dig into that. Before he does, let's go to another poll question. This will just help us understand where you are on measurement. So how would you describe your approach to measuring the results of extended enterprise learning? A, we don't do it, one of that 23% from the previous slide, or B, we measure for completion and satisfaction, or C, measurement is tied to specific business metrics. So it'll be interesting on this. We still get, when we ask this question for internal learning, measurement is still tied more to completion and satisfaction levels 1 and 2 on the Kirkpatrick scale than anything else. So we'll see what people say here when it comes to extended enterprise learning.
Right, and I should say that we certainly understand that saying we don't do it isn't the same as saying we don't think we should do it. Right. It's just a statement of fact. And I think it's a position that, frankly, a lot of us find ourselves in. We are trying to address a rather obvious need with our external learning program, and we are in such a hurry to do that and to start to derive the benefits of it that we don't do the work up front, or maybe even as we go, to measure that it's happening. We sort of say, well, it's axiomatic. If I teach somebody this, good things will happen, and I've just got to move quickly, and that's where I am. And that's just a pragmatic reality for a lot of people. So yeah, if you say we don't do it, don't think that we believe you don't think you should.
Right, absolutely. So let's see. So about 29% don't do it, which is roughly what we found in our other surveys. 45% do measure, but for completion and satisfaction primarily. And then 26% measuring is tied to specific business metrics, which, given the newness that I think a lot of you are experiencing with extended enterprise learning, that's pretty good. Good start, and hopefully we can help you make some progress.
Yeah, I find that really impressive. That's a great place to begin. As we talk about today a little bit more, developing a results-driven learning strategy. And specifically, I'll talk about 3 things when describing a strategy of this kind. I'll talk about defining results, measuring results, and materializing results. The last of which is more or less storytelling, and a pretty important part of it that we tend to leave out. So we'll get there. Let's talk first, though, about defining results. Here we are at the conception sort of a learning program, and we are looking at a gap, logical gap that exists between our program and the business outcomes that we want to improve. First of all, it's important to recognize that learning programs don't come about really in many other ways. I suppose there are some learning programs that we just do because everybody does it and we think that we should for that reason, but I think that's a vanishingly small percentage of the total. And that the much more common scenario is we say, there's a problem that needs to be solved and learning is the solution. But for a lot of people that aren't in the program itself, so maybe we see this logical chain, but for everybody else, the gap between learners completing the program or participating in the program and the business outcome improving is non-obvious. And it's therefore incumbent on us to make that connection rather specifically. And there's an idea that I'll talk about here a few times throughout the presentation called a logic bridge. And it's a rather simple thing, but I think the most useful, most applicable things often are quite simple. I hope you find value in it. But from your program through its results to the objective, the business objective that it's intended to support. And the fact of the matter is that arrow I'm supposed to click to advance the slides is very small. The fact of the matter is that how your learning program is impactful is crucial. And impactful programs are the ones that create tangible results supporting business objectives. When I say tangible, I mean measurable and ideally quantitatively measurable. When we ask people that we work with, and we work with something like 1,500 organizations that are running learning programs and using our software to as part of the complete nutritious breakfast of excellence that their program represents. When we ask them this, they say that they're trying to accomplish a wide range of things. We're lucky to work with a very diverse portfolio of customer friends doing lots of different things. We have sometimes customers that are very similar externally, like you look at them and say, oh, these two are in the same space. What they're doing with their learning programs, very different. But you see such a wide range of possible outcomes. They say things like, I'm trying to increase new sales. I'm trying to ensure regulatory compliance for a certain audience outside my organization. I'm trying to improve the performance of my partner network. I want to drive brand loyalty through an extended enterprise learning program. I'd like to increase my customers' engagement with something, my product or service or something else. I really want to reduce customer churn, and this learning program is part of that. So you see a wide range of different things that people say. But let's take it back one level of abstraction, because if you look at all of these things, in my mind, they align pretty well with three big objectives at the broader business level that learning programs are intended to affect. Most learning programs want to do one or more of these things, and that is increase revenue, decrease cost in the organization, or limit risk, reduce risk to the organization. And it's not like I'm saying you do this instead of the things that people typically say when you ask them. Rather, I think those things align. You can see that each of those things that people say from the sample that I put forward earlier sits somewhere on this Venn diagram of revenue, cost, and risk. And understanding where you sit, where your program sits with respect to the big three, I think is incredibly important in telling the story that we want to tell with what we'll call a logic bridge here. So there you are on top of your program, looking out to the business objective you'd like to move. Presumably, the first step, almost always in the learning program, is learners complete your program, they participate, and they learn something. If they learn something, then they have the opportunity to apply that thing. Not all learners will, but they could. Certainly, they can't apply it unless they've learned it. Having applied it, you hope or expect that something about their performance or behavior changes. And if that happens, then you get the business outcome you are seeking to achieve. Throughout the presentation here, I'll share little vignettes from customers of ours. It's been anonymized, many of them, to protect the innocent. But this one, customer A, we'll call them, provides paid training to financial planning and security professionals in a global audience. And given that they are in the financial space, it's not too surprising, I imagine, that they came into the relationship with us and conceived their learning program with the idea that strong ROI is their objective. They were putting a certain amount of resource, effort, et cetera, into this. They expected tangible outcomes. So they had the right mindset to begin with. 6 months into their program, they doubled the enrollments that they had in their program, moving it to a new platform and doing some other things around that from North American members. And we're returning really strong, very healthy ROI, you see there at 160%. And they're now taking that and trying to replicate that outcome with the broader global audience. Their successes in the short run are that they had a target in mind. They needed to train about 10% of their members on an annual basis to cover the cost of our platform. And any more than that was going to get them positive ROI. They were doing it other ways before, ways that they didn't think were as efficient as what they could do with an LMS, and they happened to choose us to be their partner in that area. If they could do better than training that 10%, they would get positive ROI. They hit their targets, and they've set new, very much more aggressive ones. They had some opportunities and have some opportunities still. They need to develop more courses now. They've brought the audience in and have discovered that there's an appetite for what they're doing that's more than what they are ready to provide. So more content is on the way. And they want to run some marketing campaigns that will drive even more enrollments now that they're confident the platform does what it needs to do. So in thinking about their logical story, and I'll show you a version of the bridge that has their ideas built in to show you how it can be applied to a program. Their objectives were to increase revenue and improve retention, which, if you take retention back a little bit, that's a risk play, and it's also a revenue play. they had a host of metrics they had in mind to track aligned with each of these objectives. And since we'll talk a little bit more about metrics later on, I won't dwell on those right now. What I will do is show you this version of the bridge diagram that shows their program in the format of this little simple bridge. So if they implemented a new learning platform with better marketing, that is their program, then their idea was that learners would find and purchase their first course more easily. And then having done that, they would find value from the training more quickly, and then they would purchase more courses sooner, with the result that their business objective of training revenue increasing would be achieved. And that, in fact, has been what they have done. You could probably look at this image and imagine for yourself how it might apply to your program. And we'll show you about 2 or 3 other examples as we go along to give you more opportunities to see how this works. But again, very simple, but to people outside your program, it might provide an epiphany where you say to them, this is really what we're trying to do. Here is the link between our learning program, which you are graciously providing resources or support for, and this business outcome that we all agree is good for us as an organization or institution. So moving from defining results to measuring results, I think, as I said a bit earlier, like nearly every learning program is impactful. The trouble we get into as learning professionals is that we don't build our programs to prove it all the time. There will be some of you who will say, no, I always build my learning programs that way. Good for you. And you're fantastic mentors for the rest of us. I think a lot of us, though, for reasons of expedition or lack of resources, or just maybe concern about our ability to create a program that's measurable and get the data that we need to measure it, don't do that. And knowing as we do that it's metrics that prove results, very few businesses invest in anything, at least in a significant way, on blind faith. Choosing at least one metric to support each peer in that logic bridge that we showed a moment ago is a good approach. So what I mean by that is that you have your bridge here, and it's a lot sturdier than maybe a rope bridge that you might sling between your program and the business outcomes that you want, but it isn't founded on the kind of super firm foundation you wish it would be until you apply metrics here supporting each of the ifs. What I mean by that is, okay, learners complete your program, therefore they learn. Can you prove that? What metric do you have in place to show that your learners have learned something? And it doesn't have to be direct assessment, by the way. I think that's a hesitation that we have, especially with external learning programs. We say, well, I mean, these are my customers. They're not my employees. They're my partners, or they're affiliates or volunteers or whatever. What right do I have to assess their knowledge? Well, maybe that's not the best idea directly, but there are a lot of metrics, and we'll talk about them in a second, that you can use to get at whether learners have learned as the first link in your logic bridge or first peer in your logic bridge that aren't direct assessment of learner knowledge. Then you hope that they apply it. What metric will you use to assess that? What evidence can you find that learners have not only learned, but then they've applied what they've learned? And then in the next step, they behave or perform differently as a result of the application. What behavior are you looking for? What metrics would show you evidence that it's changing? And then the business impact comes, and it's relatively easy for us to think about measurement of the business outcome. I mean, most business outcomes are inherently measurable. So that one is typically something that we all do, even if we skip the parts in the middle. It's much more powerful if supported by a logical, stepwise march toward the business outcome and metrics at each point. Here's another customer of ours. We'll call them customer B. They use training to drive awareness of their brand and their products and their services, all the things they do essentially with an external audience that is medical practitioners. They don't necessarily sell to those people, but those people interact with patients who do make use of their programs and services and products. And making medical practitioners aware of the benefits of those things makes it more likely that they'll mention those things to patients and therefore to drive the outcome they're hoping for. It's a not uncommon type of training program where the stakeholders that you're directly dealing with don't see the connection between what they do and your commercial outcomes. In fact, if you were to go, I think, to the medical professionals in this case and say, well, we're going to put you through this training program so that we will sell more, they'd be offended. And well, they should be. That's not what they're in the business of. They aren't your salesperson. They're not there to do that for you. But if you provide them with some education that makes them better at their job, and one of the side effects is commercial goodness for you, great. I think that's something they wouldn't be offended by. So this is, in the extended enterprise especially, not an uncommon scenario. So if your program is like this, maybe this is the customer example for you to look at. The successes they've had early on are that they meticulously followed the guidance we offered to them in developing a result strategy. It honestly was something that they hadn't thought of before. And I'll show you result strategy here in a minute, so don't get hung up on that term. The idea is that they built that logic bridge essentially in their program where they hadn't maybe done it before. It's not because they weren't smart enough, it's because they, again, had always been dealing with urgent things and hadn't taken the important step of thinking through the logical progression between what they were doing and what they wanted. And they really found this to be helpful in their planning of the program and their advocacy for their program and their broader organization. There's some work in progress here. They're a little bit daunted by the idea of gathering and analyzing metrics data, which is why I put them in this section. We'll talk about that in a minute, to show the results of their education efforts. So now they understand why it's important, and they've even specified the ones they want. They're a little daunted by the thought of getting that data and analyzing it, and they're going to need help doing it. I think, though, we make do so much as learning professionals with what we can get that we sometimes feel that we have to do all the things. One of the points we'll make here in a minute is that you don't, and we'll talk more about that when we get to it. Here's their thought. They put forward several objectives. They wanted to get into the minds of the practitioners that work with the patients that are their customers and increase their mind share. They want to be the thing, the solution that is suggested to a patient's problem when it's right, when it applies. They wanted to improve their learners' retention of the knowledge that they're given. Medical practitioners notoriously have to learn a lot of things to stay abreast of the latest advancements in their field. And so you're competing for mind share with these people who are incredibly busy, and they recognize that challenge. They wanted to get out of the administration of their program. They were spending, in the way that they were doing it before, a lot of time simply making the learning happen, making the connections between learners and the content happen. They would rather spend that time thinking about innovative ways to make their program better, not clicking buttons and uploading spreadsheets, which had been their lot in life before. And then they wanted to increase customers' ability to find and take training on their own that met their own needs. So those were their objectives. With that in mind, they had some metrics around NPS scores and new registrations, retention rates, completion rates, satisfaction scores, a lot of the things that were mentioned as being quite common in Claude's research slide earlier. They wanted to add more topics to their library and view course completions. So nothing here that's terribly, I would say, unusual or innovative, but really solid stuff and aligned with their objectives and presented the right way, which we'll talk about in a minute. Very powerful for them. So here's their bridge diagram with the metrics in place. You can see there that they want to offer free courses to practitioners on what they do. They think that if they did that, more practitioners would know about their products and services. If that's the case, then practitioners will be more inclined to recommend or at least mention their products and services to patients when appropriate. And if that happens, their belief, and they've proven it with their marketing research, is that patients will buy more of their products and services, leading to product and service revenue increasing. So very solid logic bridge. We love the work that they did on that. And when you look at the metrics, they've got what it takes to substantiate each step. How are we going to know that practitioners know more? Well, they wanted to look at their basic support inquiries. They got a lot of questions into their support team. And some of those questions were fairly basic, just general knowledge things. And their belief is that they won't see as many of those if the learning program works. They wanted to see, are learners downloading the resources and page views that are, and the pages, and viewing the pages that are alluded to in the training program? That's evidence that practitioners might be learning from the program. Are people getting certified? They offer a certification program in some of their services and products. And is that happening more? If so, then practitioners know more about their products and services. So on the next one, how do we know they're recommending? Well, they've got a program that allows coupon and referral codes to be distributed through these medical practitioners to give a discount to people that they talk to about this. It's a fairly common model. I bought a toothbrush once on that basis, and it's a good toothbrush. But their approach is to track the use of these coupon codes. And that, if it increases, shows that they're applying what they've learned and recommending the products and services. Traffic to certain websites also is key for them here. And then how do we know that there's more buying going on? Well, they've got sales figures. This again gets into the realm of the really quite measurable. The data is pretty easy to find. People are motivated to report it. It's not difficult to suss out. So All of that is how they were going to substantiate each link in their logic bridge. And I think it makes a ton of sense. So maybe this second example, again, starts to help you see how you might apply this strategy to your learning program, what your bridge might look like and what the metrics are that support each peer. So again, the key is to identify key metrics for measuring the success of your learning program. The best metrics are, maybe frustratingly, the ones that are established, quantitative, and available. And I'll say a little something about each of those things. You want them to be established because we all took courses in the scientific method back in the day, and we understand that you want baseline data. Established metrics by nature have baseline data. Doesn't mean that if you find a metric that would really show something good about your program and there is no baseline data for that metric, you shouldn't do anything with it. You should, but you have to do it a little differently. You have to start immediately, start to gather that baseline data, or you have to try to go back and reconstruct it from other evidence that you might have that may be adjacent to the data you're looking for. Maybe no one's actually put what you want in a spreadsheet, but you can derive it from what exists elsewhere. That might be what you have to do. So established is important because you want baseline data to show comparison and growth. Quantitative because numbers talk. I mean, you can say many things qualitatively about your program, but I think most of you have watched QBRs and other things enough to know that even the qualitative data gets quantified, and that's when it really speaks to people. Qualitative data is rich, it's amazing, it helps you improve your program, it gets at the feelings and hearts of your listeners. It doesn't often seal the deal in a business case. When you're arguing for maybe more support, more resources, maybe, unfortunately, in tight times, the very survival of your program, qualitative data is the icing on top, but you better have the cake, and the cake is the numbers. So quantitative metrics are the best ones. And available. Theoretical metrics you can imagine would be great, are great, unless you can't get them. So you have to be able to get them, but don't be put off by that. We'll say in a minute that it's actually not that hard to find the metrics you need, probably. I wanted to say here, and this was a point as Claude and I talked about this presentation ahead of time that really resonated with us and we thought we'd like to make with you, and that's that it's relatively easy with internal learning programs to say there's learning data. I'm interested in the learning data. And the learning data is often course engagement, course completion, scores on assessments that because they're internal learners, you feel comfortable administering to them, job performance data on the people who participate, all of which you feel like you own. And you look at it and you say, that is learning data. External learning programs, extended enterprise learning programs are a little bit more challenging because, again, direct assessment isn't always appropriate. In fact, it's rarely appropriate. So you have to be a little more flexible in what you look at as learning data. And our argument is that all data is learning data. Every piece of operational metric in the entire organization, no matter what it's primarily used for, you can repurpose as learning data when it's appropriate to support the logic bridge of your program. And it's such an empowering realization to say, well, I need data for my program. It doesn't mean I have to gather it. It doesn't mean I have to analyze it. It doesn't mean I have to keep it up. Or report it or present it. I can go and get it from wherever it is for whatever purpose it's being used. And as long as I can make the logical argument that it belongs in support of my program, I can use it. And if I make friends of the stakeholders that gather that data for completely different purposes, I'm going to have a lot of my work done for me. So let's look at this again. I showed this earlier, and this is the Venn diagram of revenue, cost, and risk, with some of the things that we think of as results of our learning programs overlaid on top of it. And just to clear the clutter out a little bit, let's remove most of these and focus on just 4. So we have a program here, hypothetically, that's designed to increase new sales, maybe one that's intended to reduce customer churn, maybe one that's reducing support and success effort, and another that is focused on ensuring regulatory compliance. This is a good, I think, diverse group of really believable external or extended enterprise learning program objectives. And let's talk about how we might measure each of them. So a program intended to increase your new sales. Your sales ops team, I promise, tracks all of these things, and they track them obsessively. These are unhealthy people. I love them to death, but boy, are they focused on their metrics. And in this case, that works to your advantage. They will know about deal velocity and how it's changing. They'll know about deal size on average and how it's changing in different geos and different segments and different product lines. And they'll know all the things there, I promise. Win rates, they obsessively track that. That is the coin of the realm for them and for their salespeople. So that data is all there to get, and you can use it. Regulatory compliance, these people maybe aren't as outward facing with their data, but you know they have it. And the reason you know they have it is because they're audited. And when an auditor says, I need to see this, that, or the other that demonstrates that you are complying with this regulation or the other one, they have to have compliance rate data. They've got to have incidence rate data. Now, they may not be as pleased to share all the nitty gritty of that with you, and they certainly wouldn't be pleased if you trumpeted it out in an unedited format to a broad audience. So be careful with this data, but you know it's there to get. If we're talking about a support and success effort one, this is kind of my home country. I started as a support person, almost 30 years ago. And I've since acquired other parts of the customer experience organization to where now I've got all the different disciplines on my teams of customer experience. And we've got data. Like, you may think of that organization, and maybe you've got one in your org that is very overtly data centric, and you will say, well, what's he talking about? But I think in general, people in my field, and I'm speaking about my field, so I feel like I can do it from the heart and I can say hard things without, giving offense unnecessarily. This is me talking about me. I think sometimes we go a little light on the hard stuff, meaning the hard data, the hard science, the hard skills. And you may think of us as the feelings people, the people that talk to customers and make them feel good. Well, if the people in your organization in my field are doing customer experience the way that increasingly the field agrees should be done, they've got the data. And maybe they don't even know it yet. So you might have to tell them they do. But if you are looking at a program where reducing support and success effort is part of the outcome, ticket rates, cost to work a ticket, customers per CSM that a customer success manager can carry and serve, thus the book of business, thus the kind of dead money invested in a CSM as a percentage basis of revenue, all of that is available. You can get it. And frankly, you'd be doing a favor to a customer success or customer experience person who wasn't thinking this way to ask them for this data, because they should be thinking this way. And as they go and pull the data for you, maybe, I hope, for the sake of my field, that they delve into it themselves and start to have some interesting insights that may help them make their operation better. Last one, a program intended to reduce customer churn. There are lots of sources of data here. And I made a comment earlier about lagging indicators, and I'm afraid most of the things I put here are lagging indicators too, but we'll get to some other ones here in a second that are less so. And when I say a lagging indicator, you all probably know, but I'll spend a minute to say, I'm talking about things where when this metric goes red, you already have a problem, and it's probably too late to solve it. A customer whose health score dips into the red, depending on how you calculate health score, may be beyond saving. They may have made a decision to stop using your product or service already, and that's why you suddenly have caught on that they're in red status, and you may run a save play that has a really low percentage chance of working. Anyway, a lot of these are lagging indicators, but they'll tell you they're accurate. I think about the metrics for results as belonging to some families of metrics. And, grab a screenshot here, whatever you want to do. I know the PDF will go out here in a while as well. But if these work for you, look at the area of the Venn diagram where your program resides, and look at some of the pieces of data that you might use to show the effectiveness of your program, and shop around. I think you'll find some here that you're very familiar with, and you're kind of nodding your head already. There are others that you may not have thought of as learning data. But again, especially for learning extended enterprise learning programs, all data is learning data. You should feel like you own it, and you should feel free to use it to analyze and improve your program over time. I guess if you leave with one thing from this session, it's an impassioned plea on my part where measurement's concerned to begin where you are. I think the danger here is that you'll look at this and you'll say, oh, I can now imagine the ideal measurement scheme for my program, and I want to go build that. And that because you want to build the ideal, you won't do what you can do right now. And it'll be 6 months, a year before you launch your perfect measurement program, and then it'll be great. Fine. But in the meanwhile, open a blank spreadsheet right now and start to jot down what you know of the data that you could use. And if the answer is, I don't know very much, and it's frankly kind of shoddy data, fine, it's better than nothing. I mean, my belief is that measuring almost anything is better than measuring nothing at all. So then we come to the final piece of the 1, 2, 3 that we introduced at the beginning, and that is materializing your results. I think this one goes underthought. A lot of people think about, what are the results I want? And that's defining. A lot of people think about, well, at least I should be measuring, whether we do it or not. They're thinking about that. I think we sometimes don't even think about how we want to show that our program is driving business results. And it's, again, about storytelling. It's about improving and strengthening and supporting and advocating for the business case for our learning program by telling the right message to the right person or people at the right time and in the right place. So I'd suggest a simple model for learning program stories. And to some of you, this may go beyond simple and be simplistic because you're already good at this. But for those of you who haven't given a lot of thought to this idea before, start with simple. It works. Idea is that you need to be able to explain the problem your learning program is trying to solve. And if you can't do it in less than a page, you're thinking too hard about this. You're overthinking it. Make sure you can get it into one very lightly populated page. What is the problem? Then you share the plan, recognizing that nobody is going to know more about your program than you do. And in fact, most people know a lot less about your program than you do. And you wouldn't be insulting them by telling them even the very fundamental things about your plan, because they probably don't know. And if they are an executive, speaking from experience, they may not have the guts to ask, because as an executive, you are supposed to be all-knowing, of course. And you may not be willing to put forward the idea that says, I don't know what your plan actually is. What does that mean when you say you're running a learning program that whatever? So do them a favor and just really quickly and lightly explain what the plan is. If they want to know more, they can ask you. And then last, give a present statement of progress. It's really important in doing this that you don't turn yourself into a marketer. I like marketers. Marketers are fantastic. They have a job to do and they do it really well. Don't be a marketer in this case, however. Be measured, offer factual statements only about the results of your program so far. Then you lay out next steps. My kids are fond of children's television. One of the songs I hear in the background all the time from Sesame Street is about the power of yet. So our program has not yet done this, but here's where we are anyway. And really returning to our bridge diagram one last time, the materializing step builds this story that provides a lot of strength and structure by overarching your entire program and giving people on the outside a view of what you're trying to do that is suited to their level of interest and their requirements for their involvement in the program. One more customer anecdote to share that I think can drive this point home. We have here customer C, who wants to drive more revenue through better workflow. This is a training, accreditation, and advocacy group for pension professionals. And they have paid members. They want them to pay for training and they want them to pay for certification. Membership is fine. They like having members. But really, it's the certifications where their business makes the money it needs to keep on doing what it does. It's a nonprofit. But nonprofit does not mean non-money, as any of you who have ever worked in the nonprofit space know. Money is very much a part of nonprofit. You just don't get to keep any of it. You want to spend it for it back into the business. So if they want to achieve the good in the world that they're aiming to do, they need to have revenue through training. What they were really good at, and I hope that you and your learning programs are equally successful with Customer C here, they got key strategic decision makers into strategy conversations. And I'm not sure exactly how they did that. I'm inclined to think that they gave them really clear reasons that they needed them to be there. Every time we talk with them in a strategic setting, they've got the right people at the table who literally can say, we will do that, not I will go and find out if we can do that. That's powerful. And I hope that you're having success with that in your own learning programs. And if you're not, be happy to connect with you and chat through ways that I've failed and things that I've found successful in getting strategic stakeholders to come to the table. And despite an IT initiative inside their organization to consolidate and to remove extra systems, they have been able to argue for taking their learning platform, happens to be us, but that's not the important point here, taking their learning program and investing more in it. They moved to a different tier that had more features. They got to a place where they needed more monthly active users than were included in their current plan, and they were able to argue successfully for that. So they're fighting upstream successfully against downsizing and cost reduction to get the resources they need for their program. And why could they do it? They can do it because they've done what we showed here. They're really good at materializing their results. Work in progress for them, they needed to ask themselves a few more why questions about what they're doing and the results they're truly seeking. Their belief and thought about it was a little bit peripheral, I'd argue, or surface level, I'd argue. And as they delved deeper, they got even better at telling the story we're talking about here. So their metrics were that they wanted to reduce member onboarding support requests as evidence of improving the member onboarding experience. So they wanted to drive more membership revenue. How long does it take a new person who's thinking about membership to become a member, which involves a learning experience? And they wanted then, after a person becomes a member, to see an increase in post-membership trainings purchased. They wanted also, as a third objective, to decrease the cost and effort involved in administering their learning programs. And they have 3 good metrics there for that. But they were exceptionally good at telling their story. And so I've taken the simple format of explain the problem, share the plan, present the progress, and made a hypothetical version of that for them. And it's so concise that I can share it for you well within the time we've got left, just very quickly. They said to their stakeholders in the business, our members often get stagnant and they disengage. So great, we get them as members, and then they just they're members and they drift off. They stop progressing. We've determined that learning and certificates are the best way to keep people engaged and active as members, to retain their membership long-term and get them to give us more revenue that we can use to forward our mission. So we need to make it easier for members to discover and complete those things. The plan, as they shared it in their story, is that they want to develop a new, more user-friendly online catalog, thing 1, to help learners discover things. And then they also wanted to implement changes in their learning management system, in the configuration of the system, to bring learners more timely and targeted reminders about things that they have started on but not yet finished. That was another thing they found. People would get into these programs and they'd stall partway. What's their progress so far? Well, at the time that I took this case study in a little while ago, the catalog was under development. I think by now they probably deployed it. And the new notification scheme was showing early signs of success. That was an easy tweak for them. They were able, during a call with us, to update some of the settings in their notifications, and they were seeing positive traction in both completion of their key certification programs, and then time to completion was dropping. So that's a very simple example of a story that they can tell to anyone in the organization that cares at all about the business outcome of making membership more profitable and producing profit in their nonprofit that can be used to invest in their programs. And pretty much that's everyone. Everyone, certainly at the executive team level, no matter what their function, was interested in a story like this. So a very effective example. You may be saying to yourself, all right, we've heard a lot of things today. These things are valuable to me. I get it. Where do I start though? And yeah, it's easy to get daunted by that thought. So I wanted to put forward something that we have found effective for ourselves and that a lot of our customers have said was worthwhile for them. And that's this idea of a results strategy, which is a simple, actionable framework for doing the 3 things we just talked about: defining, measuring, and materializing the impact of your learning program's results on business objectives. And it's not any more complicated than a table. So here it is. It's a 4-column table with objectives, drivers, metrics, and solutions. And there you've got a definition of each of those things. Objectives are high level and high value. They're typically one of the big 3 that I talked about, either increasing revenue, decreasing cost, or reducing risk to the organization. You can put your own spin on that. There's flavors of that, but generally it's one of those things, or maybe more of those things. The drivers are the results. What results will your learning program produce that will affect those business objectives? And they all come into play as you build your bridge, your logic bridge for your program. When you get that done, you know what the drivers and results are. So then the metrics, the peers, the things that hold up each step in the bridge. You want at least 1 per driver. So if there is a result that you're suggesting will drive the business objective and you can't substantiate that with a metric, you need to do a little bit more work and ensure that that gap is filled. And then last column is the solutions. Solutions are all the things, people, processes, changes, tools that are required to make your program go. And some of that will be technology. But even as a technology vendor, I believe very firmly that implementing technology does not get you the results you want. It makes getting the results easier. It enables it perhaps, but so many other things have to go into a program. And I'll just share a quick example. Let's suppose you have an objective for your learning program that is to improve net revenue retention. How might you do that? Well, suppose you decide that you need to improve your customers' product knowledge and increase their engagement with your product. Those drivers could conceivably impact net revenue retention. I like it. How are you going to measure that? Well, we put some metrics into this example here, where you want to drive down the support contact rate for how-to questions by 20%. That would indicate that your customer's product knowledge is improving. You might want to increase customer health scores by 33%, raise key product engagement metrics, and drive up NPS scores. That's a good selection of metrics, all of which data probably exists. And if it doesn't, you can start today. What solutions would be involved in a program like that? Well, you'd need the product knowledge curriculum. You'd need a customer onboarding program in which you deliver that curriculum. You'd need a support team that is gathering the right kind of data for you, but they probably already are. If they use a ticketing system, it's all there. They just have to put it together. You need a health scoring schema. You need a product analytics access, and you need an NPS survey program. And we would suggest a great NPS, and we happen to know where you can get one of those maybe. But all of this is pretty easy to put together. Now, your result strategy, when finished, would have as many rows in it as you have objectives, and you might have 2 or 3. We always caution people to keep it to 2 or 3 so that your focus stays sharp. But this living document can help you think about how to design and administer a results-oriented learning program. And I hope that some of what we've shared today has been helpful in your journey to do that.
Well, thank you, Seth. And I got to say, and a couple of comments from our attendees echo this, and that is, this is probably the best presentation I've seen on really how to measure learning program and really usable, simple models. And so thank you for that. And I think the storytelling part was my favorite part of it, with all the models, to be able to come out of that and just tell a simple story, because that's what most people are going to listen to, right? It's like an elevator pitch, almost, in terms of what your goals are and what you've achieved. And so what's in your experience the thing that keeps people from embarking on a program like this? Because obviously there are barriers, or more people would be doing it. So even though it's fairly simple and you've made it pretty easy, why wouldn't somebody get started in this? And what can we do to maybe help them over that hump?
Yeah, I mean, as you can imagine, I've given a lot of thought to that, specifically with reference to myself. Why don't I do it sometimes? And I think the biggest obstacle for me, and probably most people, is that they try to make it too hard. They have in their minds this perfect vision of this scientifically defensible and comprehensive results model. And because they can't do that, or can't do it easily, they think, well, I guess I'll just go do this other, very urgent thing that isn't as important. The old urgent, important trade-off. And that's why I argue for just starting somewhere. Just sketch that bridge, jot down a couple of things, send people on your team or ask your partners from other groups for the data you need to do a little substantiation of each one, and develop a taster of that story that we talked about, of materializing. Put that in front of a couple of people in your executive team, and they'll say, this is great, tell me more. And you'll say, I wish I could. To do that, I need this resource. I'm going to need someone who's going to help me with data analytics. I need you to go and shake that person over in engineering and tell them I need that product data, and they'll go do it for you. If you go to them without that little taster and you ask for those things, it's not like they'll say no, but it probably won't happen quite as quickly or easily. If you show them what can be, even a little sample of it, they'll see the potential of it, they'll be interested, and their interest will drive the outcome that you need.
What I've found a lot of times is when people say things like, I don't have time, what they're really saying is, I don't know how, I don't know how to get started. Because you can always make time for what's important, but if you don't know how to do it, then you don't feel like you can have the time.
I think people get scared of the analysis part too, Claude. And when they say, I don't know how, that's mostly what they're talking about.
Right.
There are people in your organization that do. There are people in this community that do. For one, reach out to me and I'll kick ideas around with you. I don't have all the answers, but you will find so many colleagues that are willing and able to talk you through the really quite simple, when it comes down to it, methods for analyzing the data you need. It doesn't have to be a peer-reviewed study. It's just, let's start where we are.
We just got a couple minutes left. We just got a question, which is interesting. I think we have just enough time to cover, and that is, what's the difference between a customer onboarding and a learning onboarding?
Yeah, okay. Learner onboarding and customer onboarding. So we're in B2B SaaS. That's my business. And I think a fair number of people in this group probably are. In a business-to-business sense, customer onboarding is the beginning of the commercial relationship between one organization and another. And if you're B2C, it's between your organization and that customer. And the commercial relationship is, in my mind, somewhat different from the learning relationship. So we can get someone up and running on our product and start the commercial relationship without engaging in a lot of learning. But at some point, for them to get results from our product, which is what we really want to deliver in the spirit of partnership, they're going to have to learn something too. So those things can be asynchronous from one another. I would think of the difference as being between the getting the commercial relationship and maybe the technical aspect of your product or service set up and teaching them how to use it and get results from it.
Which leads to engagement and then loyalty.
Yeah.
And things like that.
The really
Yeah.
important stuff, you know, that we sometimes neglect. We think
Right.
about onboarding and we say, oh, here's my checklist of technical tasks or process tasks. And we do those things, and that's fine. But we don't ever get to the really important stuff, which is, what did they come here in the first place to get? They didn't buy your product because they want your product. They bought your product because they want a business outcome. And you need to help them understand how to do that. And that's a learning exercise.
Well, unfortunately, we'll have to leave it there. This was great. We're getting a lot of positive comments from our attendees, and they appreciate the simplicity and yet the sophistication of the presentation. So thank you, Seth. Thank you again, LearnUpon, and thank all of you taking time out of your busy days to join us. We hope this is helpful. We will be sending a recording in PDF along in the next 24 hours or so. So thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we hope to see you again on another Brandon Hall Group webinar very soon. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again, everybody.
Bye.